The number of Americans living with Alzheimer's is growing, and it's growing fast, but so is the research to better understand and treat this devastating disease. Good morning. It is Monday, August 22nd. I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome into the Morning Medical Update. We are live here inside the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio. It is time for the annual Head for the Cure 5K. We'll have details straight ahead. We'll also update COVID and monkeypox cases from over the weekend and a potential added benefit of getting the flu shot in delaying or avoiding Alzheimer's. We have two wonderful experts to guide our discussion this morning. Neurologist and co-director of the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Disease Center, Dr. Jeffrey Burns, and geriatric hospice and palliative medicine specialist, Dr. Jessica Callender-Rich. So good to see you both on this Monday. Thanks for being with us. And of course, we always want to hear from you, so please make sure to get your questions sent into us on your chat thread, or you can send those via email. The links to those are all right there on your screen. More than 6 million Americans live with Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association reports that by 2050, that number will be nearly 13 million. Almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. Alzheimer's is not just memory loss, it kills. The Alzheimer's Association found 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or some other dementia. The Alzheimer's Association recently broke down those statistics by state. In 2020, Kansas counted 55,000 people with Alzheimer's. In 2025, that number is expected to go up to 62,000 people. Across the state line in Missouri, 120,000 people were diagnosed with Alzheimer's. In 2025, that number is expected to reach about 130,000 people. We know those are big numbers. Is this because, doctor, that baby boomers have come to kind of that Alzheimer's age, Dr. Burns?
Yeah, actually it is. So you mentioned some of the statistics there, that 1 in 3 older adults die with Alzheimer's, and 1 in 3 people over the age of 85 have Alzheimer's, and that's the fastest growing segment of the population because we're living longer, healthier lives. And so we're seeing a big increase in the numbers of people, at that high risk age group, and because of that we're seeing this increase in the number of people with Alzheimer's. So incredibly common, and it will only grow unless we develop prevention strategies and treatments that can stop it or cure it.
All right, that helps kind of explain some of those high numbers. Dr. Callender-Rich, let's talk with you now, because the Alzheimer's Association says that mild cognitive impairment can be an early state of Alzheimer's disease. They also write that 50% of physicians are not fully comfortable diagnosing it. So describe what mild cognitive impairment is, and then why is it so hard to diagnose?
Yeah, mild cognitive impairment can be a lot of things, but really it's a very early stages of the time where somebody's normal aging changes in cognition can shift to an abnormal aging, and so it can affect their function in some ways, but it's really at these very early stages, and because of that it can be very difficult to differentiate. And we know that many people actually don't get diagnosed until pretty, not late stages, but pretty moderate stages of their Alzheimer's or other kinds of dementia, because it's just so difficult to identify.
So Dr. Burns, what can you add to those challenges of diagnosing Alzheimer's disease?
Well, yeah, so that's right on. It's hard to recognize, it's hard to diagnose, and we need to be looking for it. One of the things people think is there's nothing we can do if somebody's diagnosed with one of these things, and there are things we can do. There's things we can look for to make sure aren't happening and causing mild changes in memory. But there are also, if we think it is something like early Alzheimer's, there are medications that we want to take advantage of. So I think we need to be suspicious and be on the alert for these kinds of changes as physicians. And then I think it's helpful for patients to be educated, patients and families to be educated, and to be seeking care if there's clear changes in memory.
So what might family members be suspicious about? What should we be looking for? Some of those real early signs.
Yeah, the types of signs that we find concerning are if there's a clear change for an individual, if it's not just misplacing your car keys and your glasses, but it's losing things in a way that they didn't do before. So misplacing things like they didn't do before, losing things, memory issues, repeating oneself over and over as if they've never said it. Some people like to do that, but this is a different kind of repetition. So it's telling the same story over and over again, or asking the same questions over and over again as if they hadn't heard the answers. So it's really, we focus a lot on change for an individual. Is it a distinct change for that individual over the last year or two? And if so, it's probably time to get checked out.
And Dr. Calendar-Rich, you've always said it's so important to be checking in with our parents, our grandparents, and so that you can mark some of those changes, I would imagine, right? Because if you're not seeing them or talking to them, then it starts to advance, and then sometimes you're finding it a little later than you should, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Really keeping track of how people are and how people are changing can be very important. It also, all of that information we gather from family and friends and the community members that may know our loved ones really helps tell the story, because there are lots of tests that we can do, but really the what is happening around all of those tests helps support and help us know how different this is and how it's going to look moving forward.
Does it help to document? If I'm a family member, would it help to write some of these changes down? Or, what are your thoughts, Dr. Burns?
I mean, in a way, yes. I'd say for us, it's more, it's the story over time. So it's not, you don't need to obsessively document, but if you're noticing changes, we want to hear about it, and we'll probe for those questions. So
good.
But take notice and let your physician know.
All right, we put a bit.ly link on the screen for you if you want more information about our Alzheimer's disease memory clinic. For those joining us on podcast this morning, that is bit.ly/MMU memory to get more information there. Dr. Burns, you started and you direct the KU Memory Care Clinic, and in 2004 you began Alzheimer's disease clinical research programs at the medical center. So how many Alzheimer's patients are being treated through these programs? Tell us a little more about that.
Oh yeah, so yes, we started a large research program that's now one of the nationally designated Alzheimer's disease research centers in the country, and there's 33 in the country now. And then we have our memory clinic where we diagnose and treat patients. And I think we have about 1,500 patients in our memory clinic, and we've enrolled thousands and thousands of volunteers into our research studies, and we need more. But just to give you a number, last year we enrolled about 650 people into our different research studies. We have about 30 to 40 different research studies at any given time. And so we've had just tremendous support from the community and volunteers in helping us move these studies forward.
How far have we come in the last 20 years, would you say?
We've come a long way. I mean, it's pretty amazing from my perspective how much things have changed. Now, how much has changed in the clinic when we diagnose and treat? Just a little. We're starting to scratch the surface there, but what's behind that is just enormous amount of new knowledge, new approaches, new technology for diagnosing, and I think the next 10 years is really going to bring some dramatic changes for how we treat and how we diagnose Alzheimer's disease.
Well, you kind of just touched on that, because I read that Alzheimer's was described more than like 115 years ago in medical accounts, but we're just scratching the surface, as like you said, trying to crack kind of the mystery of this disease. Why is it so tough?
So that's a great question. The reason, we're making huge progress, but the reason it's so tough is we still don't really know what causes the disease. We don't know what the root cause is, and if you don't know what the root cause is, and you're still debating that, then it's hard to design treatments to go after that root cause. And so we're attacking Alzheimer's from many, many different directions now, and that's different. 10 years ago it was one or two little directions that we were going after Alzheimer's. Now we're going after it from a variety of angles, and that's what gives me the most hope. Is that's the kind of approach it's going to take to stop or cure Alzheimer's disease, and we're now doing it. The field has more studies than ever before, more diverse approaches than ever before, and we're learning more than ever before every day.
So you've studied the effects of diet and exercise on Alzheimer's, and as far back as 2008, I believe, you discovered benefits of exercise on the brain. Tell us how you've kind of built on that work and what you discovered.
Yeah, so one of the themes of our research center is lifestyle. How can we use and better understand how lifestyle impacts the brain and brain health, and can we use it to prevent Alzheimer's, and can we use it as a treatment for Alzheimer's? And we've done a series of studies, and that right now is culminating in 4 different very large studies where we're working with groups across the country to really understand you know, prove. We want to prove. A lot of people take this for granted that exercise has a, you know, positive impact on the brain. We believe it does, but we also want to understand, you know, how much is enough, what types of exercise is best, and really understand how we can use it and leverage it to promote healthy brains, and then get people to exercise. How do we initiate exercise and sustain exercise in older adults? So all these things we're looking at from a variety of angles, and you know, we do believe exercise is good for the brain. We tell all our patients to get out every day. More is better, but start somewhere. Going from zero to something is your biggest bang for your buck. So start, get out and walk, and you know, really, you know, try to push yourself a little bit, but do it every day.
Every day. Great advice. Dr. Calendar-Rich, what kind of things do you recommend for seniors suffering from forgetfulness or dementia, really to help with kind of mental exercises? What could people be doing?
So we have to keep using our brains, right? In the same way that we want to keep moving our bodies, we have to keep using our brains. And that includes doing things like interacting with other people, get out of your house, get into some programs, creating some structure, really just moving and grooving and keeping everything going the way that it has been as best as you can is the best way that we can sort of keep using all of our faculties, because we want to use them as long as we can and as much as we can.
Is this where we talk about like crossword puzzles and doing the coloring and the different things? Are those things that help? Are there other things that you might suggest?
So people do use crossword puzzles. There's some sort of mixed data out there exactly how much it actually helps, but the truth is anything you're doing is a good thing to be doing.
Gardening.
So gardening, the same way that Dr. Burns was talking about zero to something being important, that's really true for the way that we use our brains for other things aside from exercise as well.
All right. Great advice there. Alzheimer's has made the news this year regularly because of research findings. And I want to go through some headlines and get reactions from both of you. So June of last year, Dr. Burns, I'll let you start here. The FDA approved a new treatment for Alzheimer's, but it did have some controversy. I'm going to have you pronounce it, first of all.
Aducanumab or Aduhelm.
Okay, yeah. Say it again.
Aducanumab.
Okay, so I will let you do that. That's your job today for sure, pronouncing the big words. So tell us a little bit about what it is and how it's helping.
Yeah, so this is a new drug approved by the FDA. That's a huge deal. It is surrounded by controversy. We're not using it very much yet. We've been testing it for 7 years, I think, in our research center, and we've prescribed it to a handful of people. But what it does is it's an antibody that's infused into the bloodstream. It crosses into the brain, and that antibody sticks to amyloid, which builds up in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. And it actually does a very good job of removing amyloid from the brain. What we argue about, though, is how big of an impact does that have on the patient? Can we measure benefits over time by removing amyloid from the brain? And that's not quite as clear, and hence a lot of the controversy. And so the drug's available. We're using it just in a tiny fraction of our patients. And actually now we're basically, the Medicare recently ruled that they wouldn't pay for it unless somebody was getting it while they were being assessed in a research trial. And so now we're basically only giving it out to people in the setting of a research trial. But and so a little disappointing, you know, that all the controversy. A little disappointing we don't have more data to really prove it has a big impact on patients. But I would say it's a huge step forward. It's a drug an approach we've been working on for a good decade. Or more, actually, probably 15 years. And it's a hopeful sign. You know, I think it's a first step. We're not sure if it's in the right direction. It may be a little bit to the side. Yeah. But it's a first step, and we're really excited, and we think there's a lot more to come.
Like you said, disappointing yet hopeful. So when news like that makes its way through the community of patients that you serve, a new treatment, a new option, you know, what's the feeling? And certainly for you and your colleagues.
Yeah, I think with every new treatment option, test, anything that's out there, we're always kind of looking at the potential risks and the potential benefits. And so I'm not sure yet that we know for that particular medication exactly where everything pans out. But that's really the approach. I mean, in geriatrics, that's really the approach we take with everything that we're looking at. And this is really no different.
So a team at Imperial College London recently developed an algorithm to use with a single brain MRI scan that could rapidly detect early signs of Alzheimer's. How does that work? I mean, the early signs and getting to it quick is key. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, something we've long known is that there are certain changes that we see in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease, and they're somewhat stereotypical. Everybody's a little different, but so there's a signature of sort of shrinkage patterns that we see in the brain, and we see it in the majority of patients, but not all. And so what these researchers have done is created a way to sort of detect that signature of shrinkage in the brain. It is something that others have done as well. And it's the kind of thing, this is the kind of thing, an example of the type of diagnostic approaches that are developing and that will be used in the clinic in the relatively near future.
So British researchers are looking into ADHD drugs like Ritalin to reduce apathy and improve memory and learning. Would this be something that would be worth a clinical trial?
Yeah, so this is there actually was a pretty large clinical trial published in the last year that supported the idea of using Ritalin in people with Alzheimer's who have a lot of apathy, who are and this is a common feature of Alzheimer's. There's a little less interest and initiative and get up and go, and Ritalin can reduce some of those symptoms.
A scientist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston started a small trial last November using nasal spray to stimulate a person's immune system. They call it a vaccine. Can you help us understand that a bit more?
Yeah, so this is another approach, trying to stimulate the immune system. Actually, I mentioned the amyloid antibody approach. Other approaches to stimulate the immune system to remove amyloid from the brain or reduce other types of changes that we see associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so this is one of many approaches, and this one using a nasal spray, and that's a way that drugs can get access into the brain, cross the blood-brain barrier, and get into the brain. And so that's another interesting sort of approach to going after Alzheimer's disease. Very early study, that one that you're referring to is very early, phase 1 study, and we'll see over time if it has legs and grows.
But a study nevertheless. Okay, so our last headline, a recent study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that patients who received the flu vaccine over 4 to 6 years were 40% less likely to develop Alzheimer's. Thoughts on that study?
Yeah, it's an interesting study. It's an observational study that showed that, people who received the vaccine, the flu vaccine, were at a little bit lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And, cause and effect is hard to pull apart. Is it the vaccine itself? But I think, I think it's another reason to get the flu vaccine. Very important to get that. But it may be because we maybe avoid the flu or have a less vigorous response maybe to the flu, that individuals are at a little bit lower risk over time of developing dementia down the road.
We followed our seniors through this entire pandemic through you and your insight as to what things have been like for them. How are they doing in what we're kind of calling this, post, pandemic time, where now we're kind of living this new normal, if you will? Are they vaccinated? Are they feeling safe? What could you update us on?
I mean, I think that for the most part, certainly anyone that's chosen to be vaccinated is vaccinated and boosted and all of those really important things. We know that people that are older are still at higher risk, especially those that are more frail, and that includes a cognitive impairment like dementia, puts them in that frailty category. But overall, I do think most people are feeling more comfortable leaving their house and getting out and doing all those really important things that we've been talking about for, a couple of years now.
So a community question from Lisa. She wrote in via email and said, I care for my mother who has Alzheimer's disease. The past few years with COVID has made it extremely difficult, especially emotionally. We've certainly have heard about that. And my friend's family member got COVID and their Alzheimer's symptoms seem to get immediately worse. Is this something that you're hearing about?
That's a very common symptom of any illness, really, and we call it delirium. So people with a little bit of memory problems can get suddenly much, much worse if they have a urinary tract infection, COVID, pneumonia, and so very common to see really sudden sort of what appears to be acceleration of the symptoms, so you're not imagining it, it's very common. And it tends to get better, actually. That delirium tends to resolve as a person recovers from their illness.
So I like to think of people who are perhaps older, but certainly with some frailty or some cognitive impairment, as if they're kind of walking on a tightrope in some ways, and their bodies are working really, really hard to keep them on that tightrope. And so anytime they have any sort of, even a small impact, which could be like the flu or COVID or anything, any sort of infectious problem, or even small things like changes in medications or whatever, that they can get knocked off that tightrope. And then it can be very difficult to get back on that tightrope, and it can take some time and some effort, and that's that kind of delirium, that increased confusion that we sometimes see with things that when we were 40 maybe didn't impact us at all.
All right, well, this is a great segue. On over to Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention Control, to learn how we did here at the hospital over the weekend with our COVID count. Yeah. Good morning to you.
Hi. Still pretty good here at the health system. 23 active infections, certainly better than what we saw in the 30s and 40s. 23 active infections, 5 in the ICU, 2 on the ventilator. Still 26 in that recovery period. But overall, again, as we talked about at the end of last week, I believe the trends nationally are decreasing as far as reported cases and hospitalizations. So hopefully we can get these active infections in the hospital down to the single digits soon.
Monkeypox, are those numbers still holding steady? What can you tell us?
Yeah, still about 14,000 cases in the United States. And again, I think the good thing was the news last week that the administration was increasing the distribution of vaccines across the nation as well. And of course, we have the new way to deliver that vaccine with that intradermal dosing, which is going to help and multiply our doses by 5. So overall, I think that's a good thing. We'll see how this week pans out. We know that for the last few weeks, the cases have grown fairly exponentially. So hopefully we can get a handle on this and really get those high-risk people vaccinated.
All right, a couple questions for you. The U.S. government will soon no longer be paying for COVID-19 vaccines, tests, or the treatment. Instead, you and your insurance company will have to figure all that out. So what impact do you think this could have?
You know, again, I think this is going to be in 2023, so it's still a little bit of the ways off. We have to see how that will impact. We know there's supply of vaccine right now. We know there's supply of tests. I think it's really a little bit too early to tell exactly how that will go, but we'll wait to see. And again, we're also waiting to see the new recommendations for boosters, certainly for this coming fall. Hopefully within the next 2 to 4 weeks we'll have recommendations. But overall, that pricing and that payment, it really is not going to happen until 2023. So
I want to ask you about the latest COVID-19 wave in the U.S., about if it's peaked or not, because the daily average of new coronavirus cases has fallen below 100,000 cases for the first time in about 2 months. So what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think, again, I think if you look at things like the New York Times, Washington Post, you can see those national numbers. It certainly looks like we have peaked. It took a little bit longer to get to that peak. We know there are multiple reasons why that has happened, but it looks like as far as reported cases, we have gone over that peak and on the decreasing trend. Same thing for hospitalizations as well, and overall I think that's great news. Right now it looks like the continued most dominant variant in the United States is BA.5. BA.4 is a little bit behind that, but we will wait and see. Hopefully there are no other new variants of concern on the horizon globally or nationally at this point in time.
All right, good news there. Back to monkeypox. There was a headline, Michigan-based Grand River Aseptic Manufacturing hoping to get its first batch of additional monkeypox vaccine doses ready for delivery by December. So what impact will that have? Is this a case of a little too late? What do you think?
I think it's good that we have some manufacturing here for that now. I think it's needed. We really need to get the current doses we have into those arms of the people. Wait and see while we are doing that, really try to cut down on transmission. But I think overall it is going to be a good thing to have that manufacturing here and be able to get those doses from here.
All right, Dr. Hawkinson, thanks so much. All right, I want to get to some viewer questions this morning. Mona has the same question I had. Dr. Burns, can you please spell the medication? So now you have to pronounce it and you have to spell
it. Okay. There's a brand name for the medication. It's called Aduhelm. It's probably a little easier. Aduhelm. So Aduhelm, Helm. So check that out.
Okay, spelling, that's the spelling bee question of the day. Joellen has a question. Is it hormones that cause women to be diagnosed more with the disease? We talked about that earlier, that more women. Why is it?
Yeah, and maybe Dr. Calendar-Rich wants to take this, but I would say it's true. Women are at higher risk of developing Alzheimer's, and we don't really understand why. But we have long hypothesized it may have something to do with estrogen. But we don't really know.
Your thoughts?
I mean, I think the jury's still out on that. I will say that one confounder is that women tend to live longer, which I think adds to sort of the numbers, not in the extreme that they are much higher, but it does certainly add to the numbers of people that are women that have higher rates of Alzheimer's.
Dr. Calendar-Rich, John wants to know, a family member has dementia. Does that mean I'm going to get it?
The easier answer is not necessarily, right? So there are some dementias and some familial patterns, certainly with Alzheimer's. But more than that, there are things that we can do to sort of live a healthy life, like exercise and eating right and doing all those things that can help prevent or at least slow down those things.
Yen Liang wants to know, Dr. Burns, what kind of drug is in the nasal spray? He's asking if it's a steroid. Is this the Protalin, the chemical Protalin?
Yeah, that's the one that you were referring to, the study. We've also studied insulin, intranasal insulin, as an example of sort of nasal delivery of drugs. But the one you're referring to is Protalin, Protilin.
I told you, you got to spell these. You got to spell these big words for us today.
He's been in spelling bees.
I know he has been. Okay, smart guy. Alice wants to know: is there any correlation of chemo brain and Alzheimer's?
So that's a tough question, and we haven't sorted it all out. So, but yeah, maybe. So chemo brain is real. You can have cognitive changes with chemo. Usually they resolve, but in the long run, chemotherapy certain types actually may be worse than others, but may put you at a little bit higher risk of developing dementia. Maybe it's sort of thinking of it as taking a hit. It doesn't cause the future dementia necessarily, but it does, kind of give your brain a little hit that sort of sets you up for slightly higher risk down the road of developing dementia.
Kathy has a question. I'll start with you, Dr. Calendar-Rich, and then Dr. Burns, let me know what your thoughts are. Kathy is 66. Is there a yearly evaluation or a test that I can use to chart my memory?
So within your sort of annual visit with a primary care physician, they certainly can and often will do some sort of memory screening tests. And as we mentioned earlier, that change is what we're really looking for. That said, those tests don't always capture all of the information because it's really a bigger picture. And so while we can track it quantitatively through points and things, what's more important is all the stuff surrounding it and how someone's doing at home and in their regular lives.
Question from Sharon. One of my best friends has Alzheimer's. She is 67. But was diagnosed a few years ago. Her mom died from the disease and was diagnosed early as well. Is it usually a genetic disease? We talked about that a little bit with dementia. How can I help her and her husband? So two things, is it genetic? And then what can you do to help people?
Yeah, well, if somebody has a family history, they're at higher risk over the long term of developing Alzheimer's disease. It's much more complicated than that in the research, but really if it's in your family, you're at a little bit higher risk. For 99.9% of people, it doesn't mean you're destined for it. There are very, very few families where a certain genetic problem leads to Alzheimer's disease, and if you have that gene, you're going to get Alzheimer's. Extremely rare, and so for most of us, if it runs in the family, you're a little bit higher risk. That's probably how you think about heart disease and high cholesterol and things. So it doesn't mean you're destined for it. And we see a lot of people with Alzheimer's who don't have a family history. So it's a very complex genetic inheritance pattern. And what to do about your friend who's maybe struggling or new changes. I think, if you can get them to admit, there's maybe been a little slippage without being defensive. People don't like that sort of vulnerability that they're experiencing of having memory changes for the first time in their life. And so if you can get them to admit there's a little bit of change, then I think that opens the door for, getting checked out to make sure, that you're taking care of everything that, might be contributing to the memory changes and doing everything you can to sort of keep things where they are as long as possible. So I just encourage people to see if you can get that door open and then try to get them evaluated.
Dr. Calendar-Rich, you always have great advice on how to talk with our seniors because they're pretty tough cookies and they're very independent. So when these kind of things happen, what advice do you give to families or spouses or friends?
To to go slow and to be understanding, right? So we always need to, to tell someone they have a memory problem is really not as helpful as them recognizing it themselves whenever possible. It's not always possible, certainly, but really just giving them that opportunity and being open and supportive while also creating a way that supportiveness adds safety and adds safety nets around all of the things that they're doing in life.
All right, Tanya wants to know, can you please define or explain the connection between or the differences between the mild cognitive impairment, the MCI, the dementia, and Alzheimer's? How are we supposed to figure all that out?
Okay.
Who wants to start?
Well, I guess I'll dive in. There's a lot there in that question, but MCI and dementia, it's sort of a matter of degree. Dementia, all it means is memory changes that interfere with daily function. So things people used to do very easily, now they're struggling to do. Balancing the checkbook, following recipes, things like that. That's dementia. So it can be very, very mild, but it's just interference with daily function due to memory and thinking changes. So MCI is short of that. It's new changes in memory and thinking, but don't quite interfere with daily function. And so it's a matter of degree. And then, the number one question I get is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? And so Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. So dementia is this broad term that simply means cognitive changes that interfere with daily function. Alzheimer's is one type that accounts for probably 2/3 of all dementia. So there are others, though, other types of dementia. So Alzheimer's is one, stroke is another, Parkinson's disease and related diseases are another. So, but Alzheimer's is by far the number one cause of dementia.
Anything to add?
He covered it.
I think you did a pretty good job. Okay, so Michelle wants to know, I saw a few weeks ago where KU was doing a study with milk and memory with older individuals. Can this help with dementia and Alzheimer's? Good observation, that study, and we just had a news article come out on that. And so I think it's early to know that. I mean, so that study showed that giving people milk every day, adding milk to the diet every day, led to a change in the brain called glutathione went up. And there's some reason to think that's a good thing, glutathione going up. But we have a long way to go to translate that into real benefits in dementia and outcomes like memory and thinking. So it's an intriguing study. It's actually a really cool study led by the dietetics department and Dr. In-Young Choi. Further steps need to happen before we would recommend something like milk in the diet to prevent dementia. But people are watching all your cool studies, so
it's great.
Got to feel good to know they're tracking you. Okay, so question for both of you. Last question from Mabel, wanting to know, when should a family consider placing someone in a memory care facility instead of trying to do at home? So what's best for both? I want to know that. It's expensive in some ways, and it's guilt for many people. Can you just help us know what questions we should be asking ourselves to know memory care facility, at home care?
So for me, the first thing to think about is safety. If someone is at home and they are not safe to be at home because they are trying to leave the house and perhaps wander down the street, or aren't being able to sort of follow the directions that one needs to have at home, then that for me is a flag that someone needs to be in a place that can better accommodate their needs. In addition to that, there's a caregiver burden piece. So a lot of us have a lot of guilt and desire, and really feel strongly about keeping our loved ones at home and in their setting, because that's something that's deeply ingrained in us as humans and as family members. The flip side is, if a caregiver has so much burden that they really are unable to A, care for their loved one in the way that they need or deserve, and B, it's putting so much of a burden on them that it's actually unhealthy for them, that's a point that we really have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So what is best for both the caregiver and the person who has dementia is that identifies the place that the person should be.
Yeah, you have two people you have to take into consideration, not just the patient or the person with Alzheimer's. Dr. Burns, what can you add?
Lays it out really nicely. And I just encourage people to get out and educate yourself, go visit places, learn about the financial aspects, because there's a lot of variables involved here, and those are the key ones: safety and sort of caregiver burden, and can we safely provide the care an individual needs. And at some point, that usually can't happen at home, and the best thing for the patient, the best thing for the caregiver is to move to a memory unit. But to get to that decision takes time, and I think we need to educate ourselves, visit places, and understand all those variables that play a role, like finances, in making that decision.
Like you said, a lot to consider, not just one person, it's everyone. All right, this is such an important topic and such a great conversation. I want to get to our final thoughts. I also, at some point, guys, if we could put up our bit.ly link for more information about our Alzheimer's disease memory clinic. Again, those joining us on podcast, that's bit.ly/NNU memory. So check that out for more information. Dr. Burns, I'll let you get us started. Final thoughts.
Oh, well, I think it's a hopeful time. We've got a new drug on the market, and that, achieving that is a really big deal and a sign of, basically decades of work. And I think it's the first step in hopefully the right direction. And so it's a hopeful time for Alzheimer's disease. We're learning more about lifestyle and what we can personally do to reduce our risk. And then I think the field's moving rapidly in terms of better diagnosis and better treatments to come.
Parting words for us, Dr. Calendar-Rich?
I mean, I think all of the things that are being done in the realm of dementia and Alzheimer's research are really critical. And I also think the other piece is taking a step back and looking at kind of the whole person and how each of those, how these diagnoses really impact a person's daily life and daily function, and how we can optimize and keep people at home and with their families as long as possible.
Thank you both for being here. Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts today.
Yeah, just thanking our guests. Such an important topic, obviously. Just like a lot of chronic conditions that affect so many lives, this is one thing that affects so many individual lives and so many families. Certainly, my family's been impacted by it as well. So just thank you to our guests, and there is hope and optimism for this.
Well, thank you all. As we say goodbye today, it's time for the annual Head for the Cure 5K to benefit the University of Kansas Cancer Center and brain cancer research. Here is Alexis Del Cid with the director of the Cancer Center, Dr. Roy Jensen, and president of Head for the Cure Foundation, Matt Anthony. Everyone, have a great day.
Matt, I wanted to ask you, as you reflect back on the past 20 years, what would you say are the biggest accomplishments that come to the mind for Head for the Cure?
The biggest thing is that we have brought hope through a very joyous experience to this population of people who are facing an unwanted, unexpected diagnosis with a brain tumor, brain cancer especially, to them and their loved ones. And while a very serious disease and one that has been elusive in terms of ultimately finding a cure, great progress has been made, and along the way, we've ignited the spirit of tens of thousands of people.
Dr. Jensen, what are you most excited about when it comes to brain cancer research and even innovations in care?
Over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, we have made progress in terms of extending survival for brain cancer. What I hope over the course of the next decade is that we can begin to achieve cures.
Matt, what does the partnership between the Cancer Center and Head for the Cure mean to you?
Dr. Jensen and I have built a great friendship through this partnership, and so that's at its root. In the years that we've worked together, so much has changed from the recent incredible news of receiving status as Comprehensive Cancer Center, but years before that, when it was first recognized, designated by the NCI. All of that has been instrumental in helping drive value and hope again to brain cancer patients. So that partnership has been amazing.
Dr. Jensen, to hear Matt talk like this and to say these things about a partnership with you must really feel pretty special.
The Head for the Cure event is one of my favorite events. It's almost like there are multiple simultaneous family reunions all occurring in the same place. Right. That's very special.
Matt and Dr. Jensen, thank you so much.
The CDC estimates as many as 15,000 people a day will be hospitalized for COVID this week. On the next Open Mics with Dr. Stites, the impact on area hospitals. Join us as we talk to area healthcare leaders about everything from staffing to supplies. We'll see you Wednesday at 8.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.